Sofia Wells had spent 8 years as a live-in nanny for the Blackwell family, sleeping in a converted closet no larger than a coffin standing upright, working 14-hour days that began before sunrise and ended long after the children's bedtime stories. Her back, hidden beneath modest cotton shirts, was mapped with scars, thin white lines crossing in every direction like a geography of suffering, each one a permanent signature from Preston Mercer's hands, from the years before the Blackwells, from a time when she had nowhere to run. He still owned her silence. His threats arrived in text messages and voicemails, whispered through locked doors. He had built his control carefully, methodically, turning every small debt into a noose, every missed payment into leverage. Now he had orchestrated her complete financial destruction, and the evidence sat on the kitchen counter of her converted closet in the basement, a letter from Consolidated Debt Services, the words final notice stamped in red ink like a death sentence. $200,000 due in 5 days. She had exactly $200 to her name. The math was simple. Impossible. Suffocating. But on a freezing winter night when the stars hung sharp as diamonds against the black sky, everything fractured open. The mountain lodge sat 6 miles north of Chicago, its windows glowing gold against the darkness, windows that cost more than everything Sofia owned. Vincent Romano stood in the doorway, his body going absolutely rigid. Behind him, his Lieutenant Sergio and Gino held their positions, weapons drawn, ready to eliminate whatever threat had appeared on the frozen drive. But then Vincent saw her face. He saw the child. And every man in that house understood that something catastrophic had just shifted beneath their feet. Sofia Wells stood in the snow in her threadbare grey coat, the hem fraying at the edges, her boots held together with duct tape and prayer. She was 29 years old but looked a decade older, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights spent calculating survival. Her hand trembled as she held Emma's small fingers. The 7-year-old girl was wrapped in a blanket that Sofia had stolen from the Blackwell linen closet, the only way to keep her warm. But there was blood on Emma's coat sleeves. Blood on her small collar. Blood that had dried dark and crusty on her fingertips. Vincent's breath stopped. His hands went to his sides, and for a moment the most feared man in Chicago looked like a boy who had lost everything and then found it again impossibly, standing in the snow in front of him. Emma. His voice came out broken, fractured like glass dropped from a great height. My Emma. He moved toward her slowly, each step deliberate, as if sudden movement might shatter this moment into pieces. When he reached them, he dropped to his knees in the snow, his cashmere coat worth $15,000 forgotten, his tailored suit creasing as he bent forward. His hands reached toward the child with a gentleness that none of his men had ever witnessed. His shoulders began to shake. Sofia watched as Vincent Romano, the man who had ordered executions without blinking, who controlled 15 city blocks through fear and violence, whose name alone made grown men whisper prayers, began to cry. Tears streamed down his face. His body convulsed with sobs that seemed to break open something deep in his chest, something that had been locked away for 15 years. He pulled Emma into his arms and held her against him, his face buried in her blood-stained hair, his entire frame shaking. "It is okay," he whispered against her head, over and over. "It is okay now. You are safe. You are safe." Behind him, Sergio exchanged a look with Gino that required no words. Neither man had ever seen their boss like this. In 15 years of absolute loyalty, they had never seen him kneel for anything. They had never seen tears on his face. But now his powerful shoulders trembled as he held a 7-year-old girl as if she were the last precious thing on earth. Emma's small arms wrapped around Vincent's neck, and she finally began to cry, great heaving sobs of relief, of safety, of finally being held by someone who loved her. Sofia stood motionless in the snow, watching the scene unfold before her. Her hand had gone cold where Emma's small fingers had released her grip. She felt the loss of that contact like a blade sliding between her ribs. She had spent 3 weeks bringing Emma here to safety, 3 weeks of sneaking the child out of the downtown shelter where Sofia had been working 2 overnight shifts a week beneath her primary job, 2 shifts that kept her alive only because she could sometimes steal leftovers from the restaurant kitchen. She had watched Emma in those shelter nights, watched how the child drew pictures of a man with kind eyes, her father, though Emma had only seen photos. She had remembered the news articles from 15 years ago, remembered the kidnapping that had devastated Chicago. She had known, the moment she saw Emma's face in the shelter, exactly who this child was. And she had brought her home. The wind moved across the frozen drive, carrying the smell of frost and distant pine. Sofia's breath came out in white clouds. She pulled her coat tighter, feeling the familiar ache of inadequacy, the crushing knowledge that she did not belong in this moment. These were not her people. This was not her family. She was the hired help. She was invisible. What Sofia did not know was that Preston Mercer was already moving, that his final moves were being set into place like pieces on a chessboard, and that she had less than 12 hours before he would come for her. She did not know that the debt collector's letter was only the beginning. She did not know that Evelyn Blackwell, her employer, had partnered with him to remove her from their lives completely, not through mercy, but through systematic destruction. All she knew was the cold. The loneliness. The profound sense that she had done something beautiful and that it would destroy her. Vincent turned, still on his knees in the snow, still holding Emma against his chest. His eyes found Sofia's across the frozen distance. "Come inside," he said. His voice was rough, broken, transformed into something unrecognizable. "Please. Come inside." Sofia did not move. She should leave. She had always known that this moment would come, that she would deliver Emma to safety and then disappear back into the darkness where she belonged. She had written the goodbye letter already, folded it carefully, hidden it beneath her mattress in the converted closet. She had written it at 3 in the morning, her hand shaking so badly that her handwriting was barely legible. She had written everything she would never be able to say aloud. "Come inside," Vincent said again, and this time his men moved, creating space, opening the massive wooden doors of the lodge wider, flooding the doorway with golden light that illuminated the snow and made everything look like a photograph from another world. Sofia took one step forward. Then another. Behind her, the wind howled through the empty pines like something alive and hungry. And somewhere in the city below, in a downtown office where deals were made in whispered conversations and casual violence, Preston Mercer checked his watch and smiled. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 3 weeks earlier, when Sofia Wells was still truly invisible, still counting the days until she would have nothing left at all. 3 weeks earlier, on a November morning when the Chicago wind cut through the city like a blade wrapped in ice, Sofia Wells woke to the sound of her alarm screaming in the darkness. The alarm was her phone, set for 5:24 a.m., and she silenced it with trembling fingers before the noise could wake anyone else in the Blackwell mansion. She lay for exactly 3 seconds on her cot, a thin mattress over a metal frame, draped with a blanket that had been mended so many times the original color had vanished, and stared at the ceiling of her room. Her room was a converted closet. 6 feet wide, 8 feet long, one bare bulb hanging from a wire, no window. She had slept in this space for 8 years. Sofia sat up slowly and pulled her uniform from the hook on the wall. The dress was navy blue, shapeless, starched so stiff it crackled when she moved. As she pulled it over her head, her shoulders moved and the scars on her back stretched. The oldest scars were 8 years old. They ran in every direction like a map of hell, each one a reminder of a night she had never spoken aloud, a night when Preston Mercer had cornered her in the storage room of the Grand View Hotel and taught her what happened when you tried to report a manager for theft. She had tried to tell someone. She had walked into the HR office on a Tuesday afternoon and opened her mouth and then closed it again, because Preston had smiled at her from across the room and she understood, in that moment, what would happen if she spoke. He had photographs. He had a belt. He had time and patience and nothing to lose. That was 8 years ago. Now he owned her silence through a different kind of violence. The photographs still existed. The threat still came. And 3 nights ago, a new kind of violence had arrived. Sofia dressed in the darkness and made her way down the back staircase of the Blackwell mansion, the service stairs that were narrower than the main stairs, with carpet that was worn thin in the center from 8 years of her footsteps. The kitchen was cold. She turned on the lights and began to brew coffee, measuring out exactly the amount that Evelyn Blackwell preferred, neither stronger nor weaker, exactly medium, because Evelyn Blackwell did not tolerate imprecision in anything. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. It was 6:08 a.m. By 7:15 a.m., the breakfast table was set. The silver was polished. The juice glasses were filled. The children, Marcus, age 12, and Lily, age 9, were seated at the table in their uniforms, already silent and tense because Evelyn Blackwell was present, and when Evelyn Blackwell was present, the children learned to take up as little space as possible. Sofia poured the coffee. Evelyn did not look at her. Evelyn looked at the newspaper, at her gold-rimmed reading glasses, at the distance beyond the window where the Chicago skyline caught the early light. The children need to be at piano by 4, Evelyn said. Her voice was smooth and cold, like marble. Don't be late again. Sofia nodded. She already knew she would be late. The piano teacher, Mrs. Chen, was in Evanston, 30 minutes north in light traffic, an hour north in the traffic that would exist at 4 in the afternoon. And after piano, there were groceries to buy and dinner to prepare and bath water to run and homework to supervise and stories to read and 2 children who needed someone to tuck them in and tell them that the world was not as cold as it felt. Sofia would not sleep until midnight. She had not slept more than 6 hours a night in 3 years. Yes, Mrs. Blackwell, Sofia said. The children ate their breakfast. Marcus kept his eyes on his plate. Lily glanced up at Sofia once, quickly, the way children do when they are trying to communicate something urgent without being heard. Sofia smiled at her, a small smile that was for Lily alone. Lily looked back down at her food. She was 9 years old and she understood, already, that love was something that lived in small glances and quiet moments and was never spoken aloud. By 6 o'clock that evening, Sofia was driving the Blackwell children north on the Kennedy Expressway toward Evanston. The traffic was exactly as bad as she had predicted. Her hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Marcus sat in the front passenger seat, scrolling through his phone. Lily sat in the back, drawing on a sketch pad, her pencil moving in quick, sure strokes. Sofia glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that Lily was drawing again. Lily drew everything: houses, faces, people, sky. Most of what Lily drew was beautiful. Some of it was very sad. They arrived at Mrs. Chen's house at 4:02 p.m. Piano lesson lasted 45 minutes. Sofia waited in the car with the engine running, the heat on, her hands folded in her lap. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She had 17 text messages. 14 of them were from unlabeled numbers. One was from Beatrice, her best friend, who worked at St. Catherine's downtown shelter and had written only, "Where are you? Emma is asking for you." Emma. A 7-year-old girl with dark curls who did not speak, who flinched at sudden movements, who drew pictures of a big house and a man's face over and over. Sofia had met Emma at the shelter 3 months ago. She volunteered there 3 nights a week, after the Blackwell children were asleep. She was not supposed to volunteer. Evelyn Blackwell would have fired her immediately if she had known. Sofia did it anyway, because Emma needed someone, and Sofia understood what it meant to need someone and have no one come. The last of the 17 messages was different. It had no words, only a photograph, and the photograph made Sofia's breath stop in her chest. It was her name. On a letter. A debt collector's letter. The amount due was highlighted in yellow. $200,000. The deadline was 5 days from now. Sofia put the phone down on her lap and her hands began to shake. She had not opened credit cards. She had not taken out loans. She had not done any of the things that the letter claimed she had done. But she knew exactly who had. She had known this moment was coming. Preston Mercer had been patient, but Preston Mercer was not forgiving, and she had made the mistake 8 years ago of thinking she could run away from him. She had quit the Grandview Hotel without notice. She had moved to a neighborhood on the south side that she thought was far enough away. She had taken the job as a live-in nanny, sleeping in a closet, working for a woman who did not see her, raising children who could not claim her as theirs. She had thought that if she was small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, Preston Mercer would forget about her. But Preston Mercer never forgot about anything. Sofia's phone buzzed again. A text from an unlabeled number, 3 words, "You can't hide." At that same hour, on the north side of the city, in a downtown office where deals were made in whispered conversations and casual violence, Preston Mercer sat at a desk made of mahogany that had been imported from somewhere expensive. Preston was 53 years old but carried himself like a man a decade younger, which was partly confidence and partly the fact that he went to the gym 6 days a week and spent $500 a month on his appearance. His suit was charcoal gray. His watch was gold. His smile was the smile of a man who had never been told no in his entire life and had learned to take what he wanted from people who were too afraid to say no to him. He had been waiting 8 years for Sofia Wells to break. He had given her 8 years to think about the photographs. He had given her 8 years to wonder when he would use them. And now, he had given her 5 days to understand that there was nowhere in Chicago she could hide where he could not find her. Meanwhile, at St. Catherine's downtown shelter on West Madison Street, in a room where 12 children slept on cots arranged in 2 rows, a 7-year-old girl named Emma Romano sat on her cot and drew on the back of an old coloring book with a crayon that was worn down to a stub. She drew the same thing she always drew. A big house. A man's face. The man's eyes were dark and angry in her drawings, but that was not what his eyes looked like in real life. In real life, his eyes were dark and sad. His name was Vincent. He was her father. She had not seen him in 8 months. Emma's hand moved across the paper. She drew the house and the man's face, and then she drew another thing. A woman's face. A woman with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a braid. This woman sat next to Emma every night for the past 3 months. This woman read her stories. This woman braided her hair. This woman had never raised her voice and had never touched her in a way that made her flinch. Emma did not know this woman's name was Sofia Wells. Emma did not know this woman worked as a nanny for a rich family on the North Shore. Emma only knew that when Sofia was there, the world felt slightly less cold. Emma drew the woman's face very carefully. She wanted to remember it exactly. She drew the woman's eyes very large and very gentle, the way the woman looked when she was reading stories about princesses and castles and people who found their way home. The next morning, a social worker named David Chen came to St. Catherine's to do morning wellness checks. He found Emma's coloring book on the floor beside her cot. He picked it up and looked at the drawings. He saw the big house. He saw the man's face. And something in the way Emma had drawn that man's face made David lean closer and study it more carefully, because that face looked familiar, and there was something about the set of the jaw and the darkness of the eyes that made him think of a photograph he had seen in the news 6 months ago. David took the coloring book to his office. He pulled up a news article on his computer. He searched for missing children in Cook County. He scrolled through photographs of men with dark eyes and Italian names. And at 2:11 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, David found it. Vincent Romano. Age 42. Mafia boss. Custody battle. Daughter missing. Reward offered. $800,000. David picked up the phone. David Chen's hands trembled as he dialed the number on his screen. The phone rang twice. A voice answered, professional and cold. Romano residence. This is David Chen from St. Catherine's shelter. I need to speak with Vincent Romano immediately. It's about his daughter. The line went silent. Then, hold. 90 seconds later, a different voice. Deeper. Like thunder wrapped in careful control. I'm listening. David's mouth went dry. We have a child at our facility. Emma. She's been drawing. Very detailed drawings of a man's face, a mountain lodge, a fireplace. Mr. Romano, I believe she's your daughter. The sound on the other end was the sound of a glass shattering against marble. That same evening, Sofia stood in Mrs. Chen's small office at the shelter while the social worker spread Emma's colored drawings across the metal desk like evidence from a crime scene. The big house with its stone chimney. The fireplace glowing orange and red. The man's face, drawn with such precise detail that even in crayon, his intensity burned through the paper. "Sofia, do you know who this child is?" Mrs. Chen's voice shook. Her hand shook. Everything about this moment shook with consequence. Sofia stared at the drawings. Her stomach dropped like she was falling down an elevator shaft with the cables cut. "That's Vincent Romano," Mrs. Chen whispered. "Chicago's his." She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "He's a very powerful man. Emma disappeared 8 months ago. The FBI searched. Her mother died in custody. He's been searching for her ever since." Sofia sat down very slowly in a plastic chair across from the desk. The room tilted. Emma. Sweet, quiet Emma with her nightmares and her drawings of home. Emma whose small hand Sofia had held while reading her stories about castles and princesses and people who found their way back to where they belonged. "Sofia, you've been the only person Emma trusts here. The only one she lets close. Will you bring her to see him? Tonight. He has a place, a private lodge north of the city. He wants to see her there." Sofia wanted to say no. Every cell in her body screamed no. She knew what Vincent Romano was. She had seen the news articles. She understood that men like him left trails of broken things behind them. But then Emma appeared in the doorway of Mrs. Chen's office, her small frame silhouetted against the hallway light, and she looked directly at Sofia with those dark, searching eyes. "Will you stay with me?" Emma asked. Sofia's resistance crumbled like a building in demolition. "Yes," Sofia whispered. That night, alone in the staff bathroom with the door locked, Sofia checked her phone. A text from Mrs. Blackwell arrived at 8:24 p.m. "You were supposed to pick up the children at 4. You're fired. Clear out your things tonight. Final paycheck will be mailed." Sofia read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Her job. Her converted closet. Her $200 monthly stipend that she'd been rationing for the past 8 years. Gone. She opened her banking app with trembling fingers. $217. That was everything. $217, and Preston Mercer's debt collector's letter sitting in her apartment with the words "Final Notice" stamped across it in red ink. $199,983 short of survival. Vincent Romano sat in his office on the 42nd floor of the Ravenswood building, and he had not moved in 17 minutes. His computer screen displayed the photograph David Chen had emailed, a crayon drawing of a man's face that couldn't possibly be accurate but was, in every detail that mattered, exactly him. His lieutenant Sergio stood in the doorway, shoulders tense. "The shelter director says the woman who brought her in is a live-in nanny named Sofia Wells. Age 27. She's been taking care of Emma for 3 months without knowing who she was." Vincent's voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Bring her to the lodge. Both of them. Tell her it's safe. Tell her nothing else." Sergio withdrew. Vincent turned back to the crayon drawing of his own face, rendered in shades of blue and black by the daughter he'd given up hope of finding alive. He stood and walked across his office to the locked door. Inside was the nursery he'd built 15 years ago for the son who never drew anything, who never held anything, who arrived stillborn and left the world as silently as he'd come. The crib was still there. The blue blanket folded at its foot. The wooden mobile with the name Michael carved into it hung motionless above the empty mattress. Vincent had not allowed anyone to clean that room. He had not allowed himself to dismantle it. Every object in that space was a museum of his failure to keep his own children alive. But now, as he stood in the doorway, something cracked open in his chest like an egg breaking. Emma was alive. Emma had drawn his face. The mountain lodge emerged from the pines like something out of a fairy tale Sofia had read to Emma 100 times. Massive timber beams climbed toward a cathedral ceiling. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with firelight. Smoke curled from a stone chimney that rose like a tower against the clear winter sky. Stars hung overhead so sharp and bright they looked like weapons. Sofia pulled the borrowed car into the drive and sat for a moment with the engine running, her hands locked on the steering wheel. Her breath misted in the frigid air. The temperature had dropped past freezing an hour ago. She wore her only coat, thin, patched at the elbows with blue thread that didn't quite match. The debt collector's letter was folded in her inside pocket, pressed against her ribs like a knife. In the back seat, Emma slept with her head tilted against the window. She held a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. Her coat had blood on it from earlier in the day, another child's nosebleed, that was all, but in the starlight it looked dark and terrible, like evidence of something unspeakable. Sofia got out and opened the back door. The wind cut through her thin coat like it was made of paper. She lifted Emma into her arms, careful not to wake her, and walked toward the massive front door. The door opened before she reached it. Vincent Romano stood silhouetted against the firelight, and for a moment Sofia couldn't breathe. He was exactly as she'd seen him in news photographs, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that cost more than her annual salary. But the photographs hadn't captured the scar that ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, or the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, or the way his entire body went rigid when he saw Emma in her arms. His eyes locked onto the sleeping child and something broke open in his face. "Emma," he said. Her name was a prayer. He reached out, hand shaking, and Sofia stepped forward and let him take her. Emma stirred, opened her eyes, and when she saw his face she didn't cry out or pull away. She reached up and touched the scar on his cheek with one small finger. "Papa," Emma whispered. Vincent Romano, the man who commanded empires, who had ordered the deaths of men, who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist wrapped in expensive tailoring, dropped to his knees in the foyer of his own home and wept like his heart was being torn out through his chest, piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Sergio and Gino, who had followed him into the foyer, exchanged a look neither of them had seen in 15 years. In all this time, Gino whispered, "I have never seen him cry." Inside, the fireplace crackled and roared. Vincent knelt beside the couch where Emma lay, checking her small body for injuries with hands that would not stop shaking. His fingers traced her arms, her legs, examining her like she was made of something precious and fragile. "The blood," he said. His voice was broken. "Is she hurt?" "It's not hers," Sofia said quickly. "Another child at the shelter. A nosebleed." Emma was helping him. Something shifted in Vincent's face. He pulled Emma close again, buried his face in her dark curls, and breathed in like she was air and he'd been drowning. Emma fell asleep against his chest. Her hand curled around the fabric of his expensive suit, holding on like she was afraid he would disappear if she let go. Vincent looked up at Sofia over the top of his daughter's head, and his eyes were red and raw. "You kept her safe," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I didn't know who she was," Sofia replied quietly. She needed someone." Vincent continued to hold Emma, watching Sofia with an intensity that made her want to disappear. The firelight caught the planes of his face, the angle of his jaw, the depth of his dark eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sofia Wells." "Sofia." He said it like he was learning a language. Like each letter mattered. "How did she end up at the shelter?" Sofia told him, the basics, anyway. Emma had been found 3 months ago, wandering near the docks in a state of shock. No identification. No memory of her name or where she'd come from. Just a frightened child who flinched at loud noises and woke screaming from nightmares about dark places. "I took care of her because no one else would," Sofia finished. "She was afraid." "I understand afraid." Vincent's eye sharpened on her face. Sergio appeared in the doorway with a thick envelope. "Boss." "Give it to Sofia," Vincent said. Sofia shook her head before Sergio even crossed the room. "I can't." "You can." Vincent's voice was absolute. For taking care of my daughter. For keeping her alive when I was useless. Sofia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Cash. Thousands of dollars. Her mind reeled trying to calculate. 5,000. 10,000. More money than she'd ever held in her hands. But it wasn't enough. How much do you need? Vincent asked. The question was so direct, so casual, that Sofia almost laughed. She almost told him the truth. $200,000. She had $217 in the world. $199,983 until Preston Mercer's men came for her. But she said nothing. She buttoned her thin coat, preparing to leave. I should go, she whispered. You have Emma back. That's all that matters. Sit down, Vincent said. It wasn't a request. Sofia Saturday. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside the thick stone walls, but they could hear it only distantly, like something happening in another world. Tell me who hurt you, Vincent said softly. Sofia's defenses crumbled like ash. She told him everything: Preston Mercer, the Grandview Hotel, the 8 years of stolen tips and forced overtime, and the storage room where he kept his belt. She told him about the photographs he'd taken without her consent, the ones he used to keep her compliant, to ensure her silence. She told him about the debt he'd manufactured in her name, the credit cards opened in the dark, the loans that appeared like ghosts in her financial records. $200,000. Exactly. Due in 5 days. Sergio's hand curled into a fist. Gino's jaw tightened. Vincent said nothing. He simply looked at Sofia with eyes that had seen too much violence, too much death, and had finally found something worth caring about again. A car engine sounded outside. Headlights swept across the windows, cutting through the firelight. Gino moved to look out, hand on his weapon. Boss. 2 cars. Black. I don't recognize them. Vincent's eyes narrowed, and Sofia's blood turned to ice, because in that moment she understood that she'd just brought the danger to his door. She'd brought Preston Mercer straight to Vincent Romano. And she had no idea that the second car carried Evelyn Blackwell, who had been tracking Sofia's phone since the moment she'd left Chicago, who had partnered with Preston Mercer to ensure Sofia disappeared before dawn, before she could tell Vincent anything about the kidnapping Evelyn had quietly funded to hurt her business rival. What no one knew was that Vincent Romano, the man who knelt beside his daughter and wept, the man who built nurseries for children he would never hold, was about to discover that sometimes the people you're willing to burn the world down for are worth any price. And that price was about to come due. The room erupted into chaos the moment the door crashed open. Preston Mercer filled the doorway like a poison spreading through clean water, mid-40s, slicked back hair the color of motor oil, a suit that cost more than Sofia had earned in 6 months but fit him like borrowed skin. His eyes were a predator's eyes. Hungry. Certain. 2 men flanked him, shoulders broad, hands already curling into fists. Sofia stood. Her body moved on instinct, placing herself between Preston and Emma. The child's small hand found the back of Sofia's shirt and gripped it. Preston smiled. It was the smile of a man who had never encountered resistance. There you are. Time to go, Sofia. You've missed your payment deadline. 5 days became 0 days the moment you ran. Get out, Sofia said. Her voice barely trembled. Preston laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. You don't give orders. You're nobody. You're mine. You've always been mine. He pulled out his phone, tilted the screen toward her. Photographs. The ones he'd taken in darkness, in that storage room at the Grandview Hotel where the wall smelled like mold and his belt hung on a hook like a noose. Sofia's skin crawled. Leave with me now, or these go public. Every newspaper. Every website. Every person you've ever worked for will know exactly what you are. Vincent Romano rose slowly from his chair. He didn't stand quickly. He stood the way a storm builds, gradually, inevitably, terrifyingly. "Who are you?" he asked softly. Preston barely glanced at him. "Hotel manager. Debt collector. This doesn't concern you." Sergio and Gino moved to flank Vincent, but he raised one hand. When he spoke, his voice was ice-wrapped in darkness. "You put your hands on her. You scarred her back like she was a canvas for your rage. You destroyed her financially, manufactured debt in her name, owned her silence for 8 years through photographs and threats and fear." Preston's smile faltered. "You think you're powerful because she couldn't fight back," Vincent continued. "I'm going to show you what happens when she doesn't have to fight alone." Before Preston could respond, a car door slammed outside. Then another. Sofia's blood froze. She recognized that sound, expensive heels on gravel. Evelyn Blackwell swept into the lodge like a winter wind, wearing a white fur coat that probably cost $40,000, diamonds at her throat catching firelight and scattering it like broken stars. "Vincent Romano," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as poison poured into milk. "What a delightful surprise." She turned to Sofia with an expression of contempt so pure it was almost beautiful. "Did she tell you she's been stealing from me? Forging my signature on checks? Embezzling?" Sofia's face went white. "That's not. Of course you deny it." Evelyn spread papers across the table with theatrical precision. "Checks." Sofia's name forged across the bottom. Bank records showing deposits that never happened. Her handwriting, or a perfect copy, close enough to destroy her. "Preston came to me months ago with concerns about your financial desperation. We've been building the case quietly. You're going to prison, Sofia. Unless Vincent would like to protect a thief and damage his own reputation further." Vincent's eyes moved between the papers and Sofia's face. For one terrible, eternal moment, Sofia saw it, doubt flickering behind his gaze like a candle in wind. Her heart shattered. He was going to believe them. Of course he was. Why would he believe her over documentation, over evidence, over the word of a wealthy woman whose family name carried weight? Preston moved closer, close enough that Sofia could smell his cologne mixed with something darker, the smell of a man who enjoyed causing pain. "Last chance, Sofia. Leave with me. Sign over your power of attorney, every account, every claim. I'll make the criminal charges disappear. You'll vanish quietly, and no one needs to know about the theft, the photographs, any of it." Sofia stood in the center of the lodge, firelight casting shadows that made her look like a ghost, like something already dead. She was shaking, not from cold but from the weight of 8 years crashing down simultaneously, a building collapsing in slow motion. Her hands were numb. Her mouth was dry. She had $200 in her bank account. 200. She had slept in a converted closet. She had eaten cold leftover risotto from garbage cans behind restaurants. She had endured 8 years of terror to survive, and now she was going to disappear anyway. They would drag her away screaming into the Chicago night, and no one would look for her because she was nobody. She was invisible. She was. Emma's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "Sofia, don't go," the child whispered. Small. Frightened. Hopeful. Sofia opened her eyes. She looked at this 7-year-old girl who had already lost her mother, who had been kidnapped by a man she should have trusted, who had learned early that the world was dangerous and people left. And something shifted inside Sofia's chest, something that had been breaking for 8 years suddenly crystallized into something unbreakable. Sofia pulled her arm away from Preston. Her voice was steady despite the shaking. "No." Preston's face darkened like a bruise spreading. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not going with you. I'm not signing anything. Do your worst." The room went silent. Then Vincent Romano moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a weapon. "Sergio. Gino. Make the calls." Sergio pulled out his phone. Within seconds, he was speaking rapid Italian, names, locations, coordinates, the language flowing like music underneath the chaos. Gino moved to the window, and Sofia saw what Preston and Evelyn had missed, 12 men in black emerging from the tree line like ghosts, tactical gear catching the last light of day, weapons holstered but visible, faces blank and professional. They surrounded the lodge. Vincent turned to Preston. "You like to control women who can't fight back. You corner them in storage rooms. You take photographs in darkness and build debt like a cage. You owned her for 8 years through fear." He stepped closer. Preston backed away, bumping into the wall. "I'm going to show you what happens when someone decides to fight back." The 12 men entered silently. They moved with military precision, boots striking the wooden floor in rhythm. Preston's bravado crumbled like ash. His face went grey, then white, then a shade somewhere between terror and surrender. "Wait, I'm just a hotel manager, this is just business." Sergio handed Vincent a folder. Vincent opened it, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. 7 counts of fraud. 15 counts of harassment. 3 counts of assault. 2 counts of blackmail. All compiled in the past 3 hours. Preston's legs gave out. He collapsed onto his knees, trembling like a cornered animal. "You can't do this. I'll go to the police. I have rights." "The police are already waiting," Vincent said, gesturing to the window. Blue and red lights were beginning to flash through the trees. FBI vehicles. Federal fraud charges. Minimum 40 years. "Please, please, I'll delete the photographs, I'll forgive the debt, she can keep the money." Too late. Vincent's voice was final. "You should have thought about mercy when you put your hands on her." 2 agents grabbed Preston's arms and dragged him away screaming, begging, his dignity shattering like glass on concrete. Sofia watched the man who had controlled her life for 8 years disappear into the night in handcuffs, his voice fading into the distance until there was only silence. Vincent turned to Evelyn. She was still composed, but her hand shook as she reached for her coat. "This is business, Vincent. Surely you understand. A woman embezzled from me. I simply protected my interests. You forged documents to frame an innocent woman. You partnered with a predator. You orchestrated tonight to destroy her before she could become a problem." Vincent's eyes were merciless. "Sergio, show her what we found." Sergio projected images onto the wall. Bank transfers from Evelyn to Preston. Emails discussing Sofia's elimination. Messages planning tonight. Evelyn's face went rigid as her own words appeared in light, cruel, calculated, deliberate. "Those are private communications," she said, but her voice cracked. "Not anymore." Vincent gestured to the window. News vans were arriving, satellite dishes extending into the night sky. The press received an anonymous tip. The FBI received evidence of conspiracy. Your board of directors received documentation of embezzlement. Yes, we found that too. $47 million over 5 years. Federal agents entered, badges gleaming. They read her rights as cameras flashed outside, visible through the windows. Evelyn tried to maintain dignity, but tears started streaming down her face, tears of rage and humiliation and the knowledge that everything she'd built was burning. "My reputation," she whispered. "My family. Should have thought about that before." They led her away in handcuffs. News cameras captured everything, the wealthy matriarch arrested at a Mafia boss's mountain lodge, her face on every screen, her name about to be on every newspaper in America. Vincent turned to Sofia. She was standing frozen, watching her destroyers disappear. "It's over," he said gently. His voice was completely different now, soft, careful, like he was speaking to a child who'd seen too much. "Preston Mercer will spend 40 years in federal prison. Evelyn Blackwell's empire is finished. They can't touch you anymore." Sofia's knees buckled. Vincent caught her, his arm steady, his presence solid and real. And for the first time in 8 years, Sofia Wells, invisible nanny, abuse survivor, woman with scars like a map of hell, broke down crying in someone's arms, finally understanding what it meant to be seen. Not by the whole world. Just by one person who mattered. Finally, she was safe. The guest room was silent except for the sound of Sofia's pen on paper, scratching out words she never meant to speak aloud. Outside the windows, snow fell on the pines surrounding Vincent's lodge, each flake landing soft and final. She sat at the desk in the pre-dawn darkness, her hands trembling as she wrote. The letter filled 3 pages. "I can't stay," she wrote, her handwriting small and careful, trained by years of trying to take up as little space as possible. "Vincent, you saved my life. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for me when I had nothing left. But I can't let you pay the price for knowing me." She paused, her pen hovering above the paper. "Emma needs you. She's already lost so much. I won't be the reason someone comes for you again. I won't be the weakness they exploit. Preston is in custody. Evelyn is finished. The debt is paid. And I'm going to disappear before anyone realizes there's a connection between us." Her eyes were dry now, burned out from 3 days of crying. She'd used up her lifetime allotment of tears. What remained was clarity, sharp and cold like the winter outside. "Thank you for giving me my life back," she continued. "I'll never forget you. I'll never forget the night you stood in the snow and looked at me like I was worth saving. But this is the only way I can protect you both." She signed it simply, Sofia. The letter took 15 minutes to write. Folding it took 3 seconds. Leaving it on the mahogany desk took less than 1. She looked around the guest room, the soft grey walls, the real bed with the down comforter, the window seat where she'd sat yesterday watching Emma play in the snow. None of it belonged to her. She'd borrowed this life for 7 days, and now it was time to return to the real world. The one where she was nobody again. She'd packed her bag an hour ago. The small duffel Vincent's men had retrieved from her closet room at the Blackwell estate. That's where it all fit, everything she owned in the world. A nanny's uniform. 2 pairs of jeans. 3 shirts. Underwear that had holes in the elastic. A pair of shoes held together with duct tape. The total material value of Sofia Wells's existence came to approximately $47. She'd added the prayer card her mother gave her before the cancer took her voice. That was priceless. Everything else was ballast. The hallway was dark, the lodge holding its breath in the hour before dawn. Her footsteps on the wooden floor sounded loud, deliberate, like she was walking away from something instead of toward it. Which she was. The staircase descended into shadow. Her hand trailed the banister, mahogany smooth and cool beneath her palm. The front door was massive, oaken glass, the kind of door that cost more than 3 months of her old salary. Her fingers closed around the handle. Cold metal. Real. Heavy. Locked. "Where are you going?" She froze. Vincent stood at the bottom of the stairs in a black t-shirt and jeans, his hair uncombed, stubble darkening his jaw. His eyes were red, not from anger, but from exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that came from not sleeping for 36 hours straight. He held the letter in his right hand. Sofia's throat closed. "It's better this way," she whispered. Vincent crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and solid, the kind of man whose presence filled rooms. But when he spoke, his voice was soft. Devastated. "Better for who?" "For you. For Emma." Sofia's voice cracked on her daughter's name. She wasn't her daughter. She never had been. "I'm nobody, Vincent. I'm a nanny with scars and $200 to my name and a debt collector's letter with my name on it that." "Stop." His voice cut through her like a blade. "Stop saying that. You're not nobody. Not to Emma. Not to me." Sofia shook her head, and tears spilled down her cheeks without her permission. "You don't understand. People like Evelyn and Preston, they don't just disappear because they go to prison. They have friends. They have connections. Someone will always come looking. Someone will always see me as your weakness. I won't let Emma lose you because of me. I won't. Because you love me, Vincent said, and it wasn't a question. You wrote it in the letter. You wrote that I made you feel real. That's not what you write when you don't love someone. Sofia couldn't look at him. Look at me. His voice was gentle. A command wrapped in tenderness. Look at me, Sofia. She did. His eyes were dark, almost black, and in them she saw something she'd never seen before. Reflection. She was seeing herself through his eyes, and in that reflection she wasn't invisible. She was visible. She was real. She mattered. I lost my son 15 years ago, Vincent said, his voice steady despite the trembling she could feel in his hands. The nursery upstairs is still exactly as he left it. I couldn't let go because letting go meant accepting he was gone. And then Emma appeared in the snow, and I couldn't lose her. But I knew I would. Because men like me don't get to keep the people they love. The world doesn't work that way. Vincent. Then you showed up, he continued. You had nothing. No money, no safety, no reason to fight. But you fought anyway. You stood between Preston and Emma. You stood between me and the darkness I live in. His hands came up, cupping her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I'm not losing you to some idea of protection. You don't get to disappear. Not from me. I'm scared, Sofia breathed. Of what? That this isn't real. That I'll wake up back in the closet in the basement. That you'll realize what I actually am. He kissed her. Soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. The kiss tasted like salt from her tears and something sweeter beneath it, something like hope. When he pulled back, his voice was steady. You're staying. Not as a nanny. Not as someone who sleeps in a closet. As someone who belongs here. With us. Sofia. Emma's voice came from the top of the stairs, small and uncertain. Are you leaving? Both adults turned. The 7-year-old stood in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed rabbit Vincent had bought her 3 days ago. Her eyes were wide, afraid. The same fear Sofia had seen in her own reflection 1,000 times. Vincent's voice softened further, if such a thing was possible. Emma, come here. She descended the stairs carefully, her small feet padding on each step. Are you going away like everyone else? Sofia knelt down, her joints protesting, her knees hitting the cold marble floor. She was eye level with Emma now, and in the girl's face she saw herself, not as she was, but as she could be. Protected. Safe. Seen. No, Sofia whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Emma crashed into her arms with the full force of a 7-year-old's need, and Sofia held her, breathing in the strawberry scent of her hair, feeling the small heartbeat against her chest. It beat fast, scared, then gradually began to slow. To trust. Vincent wrapped around both of them, his large frame enclosing them like a shield. And Sofia Wells, who had spent 8 years invisible, understood in that moment what it meant to be seen. Not by the whole world. Just by 2 people who mattered more than the whole world. The morning light began to creep across the marble floor, grey and cold at first, then warming. Snow outside the windows caught the dawn, throwing prisms of light across the walls. The debt collector's letter lay on the desk upstairs, forgotten. She wouldn't need it anymore. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.